Welcome to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my co-host, John Barker. That's John on the left side of your screen. And in the middle is Cris Croft from the 8th District?
8th District.
8th District out of Overland Park. And, of course, John from the 70th District, which is our area where we're filming right now. We're filming this on a Friday afternoon, and these good folks have come straight from the legislature with updates and current information, and we thank you so much for doing that. Thank you so much, you guys, for the work that you put into the legislature, because these are tough times.
Yeah.
I don't have to tell you guys that, but everybody knows that one. So, John, where do you want to start?
Oh, well, this is week 4. Going pretty fast. We're still, social distancing, wearing our mask, and fortunately we have not had an outbreak of COVID-19, so we're able to have our committee meetings. We were on the floor on Wednesday this week. We ran about 8 bills. But, there's other things that are coming. We talked a little about it last week. This unemployment fraud, that's going to be huge. And Cris is on Commerce, and he's had them folks in front of him, and maybe the next segment he'll talk a little about that. We've also had the governor's talked about Medicaid expansion, adding medical marijuana to it to pay for it. She says it's going to make $55 million. Well, last year when she introduced it, she said she was going to be able to do it and it wouldn't cost the state anything. So, either last year she was wrong or this year she's wrong. I'm not sure. But she did go back to the board of directors of KPRS and tried to have them reamortize it again. She's tried that for the last couple of years, where she could get money up front, a couple of $100 million to spend, but it would cost over $2 billion over the 25, 30 years that they would have to take that out.
Would that be out of that KPRS fund again?
It would be out of the KPRS fund. We've got a plan. We've worked on it, at least I've worked on it for the last 8 years, and it's, eventually we will not have an unfunded actuarial.
Right.
But if you keep dipping into it, it just continues another 10 years on the interest. It's just not good. The board of directors recognized that, and they did not authorize the reamortization. Of course, she can come to the legislature, and we're not going to do it. So she's not going to get that additional funds up front. But other than that, on Fed and State, we've met several times this week. We've passed out a few bills. We've got a few bills that we'll be working, and we're getting assigned more bills every week. The leadership's doing a good job. The Senate, one of my little pet peeves is about the COVID-19 because of the governor's plan. And the Senate stepped up this week, and they actually passed a non-enforceable concurrent resolution saying, Governor, why are we giving COVID-19 shots to inmates? We should be able to give it to the guards and give it to those prisoners that are 65 and over.
Because they're more at risk.
They're more at risk. And she's doing that instead of going out to the law-abiding citizens and saying, we're going to give you the shots. We're starting next week in Dickinson County doing the 65 and over. But those shots come in every week. I think we're going to get maybe 800 to 1,000 next week. But young prisoners are not going to suffer as like an older person. So, I think they should follow the same guidelines as we follow with the rest of the population and not give them preference. And that's what the Senate resolution was about.
Okay. All right. And you'd mentioned before, of course, we talked the last time that you were here, visited about the tremendous amount of money that was lost on the unemployment claims. And as I recall from our conversations before, it was over 73% of the money that was lost from fraud.
Fraud, exactly. And the Department of Labor closed down for a week. And let's just state this. The governor is responsible for the Department of Labor. And they've done a poor job. They closed down for 2 days or 3 days. Sure. And try to put some firewalls on their computer. And after they put them on, they had 400,000 hits. What, in a day, or was that an hour?
I think it was an hour.
I think it was an hour. it's gonna hurt us because our funds have diminished. We're down to just north of 200 million. We started out a year ago with $1 billion.
And I think you told us before there was a workforce in Kansas, or is a workforce in Kansas, of 1.7 million.
Right.
And pursuant to what their documents were showing, there was over 1 million people applying for unemployment.
Exactly.
And
our unemployment's only about 4 or 5% right now.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
Well, it didn't. It didn't
work.
We're going to cut away, take a break. You're watching Legislative Updates. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my co-host, John Barker. He's on your left as you're looking at your television screen. And in between is Cris Croft, the 8th District out of Overland Park. And as we like to say around here, Connie's husband, Cris. And Connie's, of course, off screen. And we appreciate you being here, Connie.
Yeah. And he's also the chair of the new redistricting committee, which is a very important committee.
All right, you got a lot on your plate, I know, and here's the good part about this. You're retired military, colonel, retired, and thank you for the service that you put in, just like John, and thank you for everything that you're doing to be a part of the legislature, and you're into your second term right now.
Second term,
And
third year.
Third year, okay. So how do you like it so far?
Well, this year is definitely different with everything going on, but you know, you're used to all kinds of environments with the military, and so it's just a process we have to go through, and you know the rules we got to follow, and we'll follow them. We'll make sure we're safe and doing the right things so we can get the people's work done.
What was your MOS when you were military?
So transportation,
okay.
88, and then became logistics, and then later on in my career as we move up, you get to do other things, and I got to, at the very end, run the Army's Leadership Center, so I really enjoyed that.
Well, then you're used to a lot of changes, modifications,
right.
Changing on the fly and so forth.
Actually makes it fun. Mm-hmm. You know, if you go into it with a positive attitude, and rather than trying to think about how bad it is, it's not bad. Just be positive, and you'll find ways to get after things and make things happen.
Yeah, just one step at a time.
One step at a time.
Okay. Fill us in. Where do you want to go?
Well, obviously, there was a question or comment about redistricting, and I'm excited about the opportunity. You know, every 10 years we go through this process where we have to redraw all the lines all across the state for all 125 of our congressional. We redraw our Senate districts as well as the U.S. districts. We have to draw all of that, and it's all based off data that we get from the census. The census data has been delayed. Normally it would come in about April or May timeframe. And then we go through a process of cleaning up the data, making sure it's all right. That process doesn't have to happen because some of the stuff we did 2 years ago in the legislature. But because of COVID, we're probably not going to get the data now until the end of July, maybe even August. So it delays us quite a bit, but it's something we're preparing for, and we're going to be ready for it when it starts happening, when we get the data, and then what we go through the process of talking to people and getting feedback. But I'm really excited about the opportunity. It's a great team, and anyways, like I said, I'm excited.
Well, Cris, you know, the logical thing that the most of us, I think, watching the show would probably say, well, isn't it set up by counties? So it's, you know, you got Dickinson, Gary, Morris, any of those, you have these counties put up together, but it's not. It doesn't follow county lines, does it? Not
always. You try to do some of those things. You try to keep communities of interest together. I mean, there's a lot of things you try to do, but it's all built around a basic building block of, and they call them blocks, and they're just blocks of folks, and almost like a city block, if you will. And the whole state's built around that, and you start putting all that together to create and try to keep things. And we'll go around the state. We'll talk to people about, you know, what are some of the things you desire? What are things that we should consider? So we're going through that process, and then we put all that into, if you will, you put it all in the pot, you stir it all up, and whatever comes out, that's what comes out, as trying to meet everybody's needs.
So is it likely that there will be some people who are representatives that said, well, you know, this was my territory before, and these were businesses that I'm familiar with, and this is what I was working with, this is the Board of County Commissioners or so forth I'm used to, but now we're changing over because of the redistricting?
There could be some changes like that, absolutely. There was last time, too. Right. Every 10 years there's a shift of some of that, and it's all based off population. It's a math problem as we go through. As you are at the national level, there's less deviation that you can have. As you move with the state level, there's a little bit more deviation. just because of the numbers. But you adjust one, you got to adjust another. So it's quite a dynamic thing, and I actually enjoy the challenge. This is going to be a challenge, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. And Western Kansas has lost population, so that may mean that we lose a district out in Western Kansas, and Johnson County, of course, growing.
It is.
They may add a district because basically every district has 23,000 people in it.
About
24,000 people. So we try to keep that based upon the federal legislation of one vote, population.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Try to equal it out.
Right. And that's the biggest thing is you got to equal them out. And so as population has changed, and like I said, we won't know those numbers until probably July or August.
Well, when does this have to be done?
So we have to have it done for the next session. So it has to be done before the next election.
Right.
And so we try to give as much notice as we can. So our goal is to get it done before the next session's out, so we have time to give people a chance to get to know their constituents.
Okay.
And if we don't get it out, and we did not get it out in 2012, the federal court comes in, 3-judge panel, and they do it.
That's true.
And so...
is that what happened in 12?
It did, and in those districts, they had a number of representatives that got drawn into the same district. So they were either run against each other or one would bow out. So it's an interesting process, and there is some politics involved. The governor's got to approve it, or we would have to have the number to override her veto of it.
What happens if she vetoes it? And I mean,
if we override the veto, and that happened in 12, that's fine. Our plan works. If we do not override her veto, or if she chooses to veto and we don't override it, then it goes. If we can't get another plan on board, then it goes to federal court.
It goes to the 3-judge panel.
3-judge panels.
They're not going to be able to spend the time or have the knowledge that you folks have working on this. They're just going to
just draw it on a map.
And begin to go from there.
Right.
Well, that's interesting.
Definitely going to be interesting.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be. We've only got a few seconds left on this segment, but when we come back, where are we going to go?
Oh, I think Cris is the vice chair of insurance, but he's also on Department of Labor, so he has a lot of knowledge about the Department of Labor.
Okay.
And that's going to be in the news the next few weeks.
Yeah, I'm sure that it will be. We're going to cut away, take a break. You're watching Legislative Updates. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my co-host, John Barker, and in the middle is Cris Croft from Overland Park, the 8th District. And Cris, we were just talking about a number of things with the legislature, but there's a new bill that I think you have had something to do with, and it's in committee or just came out of committee. What is it?
So it's the occupational licensing bill. It's if you want to move to Kansas and you have a license and you have some job experience, then we want you to come here. And if you want to move to Kansas, then we've sped up a process, and we take into account the fact that you have work experience. And so as you move across the line, we don't say, oh, now you have nothing and you got to just basically meet these standards. It's taking your job experience and the scope of practice that you've had there and applied against what we expect in our scope of practice here to see how you may be able to gain our license here. This is part of the workforce development and how we're going to grow our economy is building the talent base that we have. The also piece to this is that we're expecting that it speeds up the licensing process for those that live in the state. So we know it's not directly there, but we're going to try to have some second and third order effects that increase that.
So if you have a license like a plumber in another state and
Right.
you move to Kansas,
Right.
what's the process?
So you come in, you apply, right? You become a resident, you apply, and then they have, once you've submitted all your paperwork, they have 45 days if you're non-military, 15 days if you are military or a spouse or veteran, to issue that license to you. So they have that amount of time to review your application and make sure it's good, and you get your license.
So it's kind of a reciprocal from the other state?
It's
Not
kind of
necessarily.
reciprocal, but really what it's doing is it's recognizing that you have work experience and that you have met the qualifications in another state, taking all of that and then comparing it against what our standards are and making sure that you've met the standards in a safe and in a safe manner for the people, for our state, and for the people of our state.
And so the goal behind it would be people who have skills that are experienced and so forth can move right into Kansas and they can bring that skill with them.
That's correct. and that we recognize that skill as they come across the line, that it doesn't disappear when they cross the line.
Oh, okay.
So
All right.
Bill moved out along last year. We just got hung up by COVID, and so we're expecting we'll probably hear it next week.
But it also involves military.
It does. It was actually based around the military.
Right.
Military. This was done in 2015 for the military, and so, but we recognized at the time with the language it was taking about 9 months to get your license, which is obviously way too long. The Department of Defense has asked all the states to kind of speed the process up, and so we've taken that. Arizona did it first. We were the second state last year. Since we didn't get it done, but in our process, we're one of the only states that actually do recognize all the different licensing capabilities as people move in here. So it's going to be an exciting time, and I believe we're going to get that across the goal line this next week.
Well, very good. You expect that it'll go to vote next week?
I think so. It'll go across our House floor, we believe, and then it'll be in the Senate by the end of February.
Okay. All right. And what else are you working on?
Talk about the Department of Labor. That's what we're...
Well, I tell you, it's a crazy situation right now. I mean, I know all summer we've all been, sharing folks that are calling in, and people haven't been able to connect to the Department of Labor. There've been unemployment that hasn't been paid, and it's really unbelievable. But as was mentioned earlier, we had a great fund. We were in a really good position, and as you looked at some of the stats, and I know you're going to put those up, but as you look at the U.S. level, it jumped. And so did the Kansas level jump in initial request for unemployment. The U.S. level kind of bottomed out and kind of leveled off. Kansas did as well, and then all of a sudden it started climbing. And now it's just gone through the roof. We're actually number 2 in the nation.
Wasn't that an example of lots of fraud?
It is. And how the fraud happened, they're all still trying to work through that. As was mentioned earlier, the Department of Labor shut down for a couple of days, 3 days I think, to try to rework their systems. And they're trying to make all the different things talk, but I'll tell you, it's sad that, I think we're right around 300 or 1/3 of where we were in our budget or in our trust fund for this. And unfortunately, we got to build it back up. The challenge is how fast do you build it back up? If you do it too fast, you're going to crush businesses trying to get there. If you do it too slow, what happens if the next situation comes up? So it's a balance we've got to work out, but we've also got to do it in a way that, again, doesn't crush businesses. And those that have done the right things, we can't just throw all that on them, because we'll end up getting rid of all those businesses because they can't function like that. And
the
that's
state's
the
going to charge these folks,
right?
Because they pay into unemployment.
Right.
Employers do, and they will be paying more into that fund than they would in their income taxes. So there was a bill introduced to hold some of these businesses harmless because it was not their fault. They paid into it. It was the state that dropped the ball and allowing all this fraud and depleted the fund. So there is a bill, the speaker I think introduced it, was to hold these businesses harmless and have the state replenish the funds, particularly to the amount that was of fraudulent claims, once we identify that. And that could be $700 million.
Wow. Which branch is it of the government, the state government, that's in charge of that situation that's taken place?
We have the Kelly administration. It happened on her watch, and so it's her Secretary of Labor, this one is her third or fourth Secretary of Labor. So, if it occurred on your watch, you're responsible.
I think it's a little embarrassing for the state.
It's going to get worse.
Wow.
It will. And I tell you what's so frustrating is constituents are calling us, and all we can do is refer them into the Department of Labor. We can't go get on the computer systems ourselves. Many of us have offered to go over there and try, but and they've put 450 people to answer phone calls, and they're just not able to handle all the calls. They're trying, but it's bad. It's bad.
I had a guy from Chapman call me yesterday. He said, "John, I've called for 30 days, 50 times a day, and no one's picked up." I said, "Well, I don't know how much I can help you, but I gave him a number that the Department of Labor had gave us, the legislators, and I referred to him and said, if you can't get through there, call me back." He didn't call me back, so hopefully he got through. But he was calling 50 times a day.
Yeah.
Oh, that's tremendous. And last time we were here and did the show, John said at the end of the show, if you're having problems, call me. And I'm glad to see that people did.
I got a number of emails. In fact, that I mentioned, several people from Solomon have sent me where someone had filed in their name. And then they get the 1099 G, I think, and then they have to go in and say it wasn't me.
That's not even right. We're going to cut away, take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my co-host, John Barker. In between us is Cris Croft from the 8th District, and that's Overland Park area. Cris, first off, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank
and
you.
we appreciate your wife, Connie, bringing you in here and make sure that you look good when you got here. You look sharp.
Oh, thanks, sir.
And
Thanks for
John,
having me.
you got a lot on your plate, and next week, I don't know what we'll be doing, but we'll be doing the same thing. We'll be talking about this, where it goes. I don't know, but I got to tell you guys, we really appreciate you guys being at the legislature, what you're doing. Wish we had more time to talk about it, but come next week, we'll have more updates.
have
And
more.
thank you guys. Thanks
right.
for watching Legislative Updates. See you next week.